Hi everybody, how's it going? My name's Alex Hoffman. I'm the publisher of Field Mouse Press. It is a joy to be here doing the moderation for this panel, Fish Out of Water. We've got an excellent group of cartoonists up here to chat with you, some from kind of nearby, as in part of the United States, and some of them not so much. So we'll go down the line. So this is Trishelle. Trishelle, would you introduce your work just briefly?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Trishelle Jeffery. My book, Best Breasts in the West, was published by Field Mouse last year, and I am up for promising new talent in the Ignats tonight. So I do autobiographical work. My book is it is a comedy about thinking that I might have breast cancer and the mental turmoil that causes, making me realize that I want to live. Field Mouse has it at their booth. It was originally a hand-printed and bound, like, fine art edition that I did all myself on a printing press, and I have a copy of that version at my table. So if you want to come check it out and feel the embossment of some collagraphs, come find me.
If you're a print nerd and love that stuff, then Trishelle is your person. Next up we have Marc.
Yeah, hi. I'm Marc Torices. I came from Barcelona, and I explained my book too, right?
Yeah,
It's some kind of like an anthology, fake anthology about a character, dog, who. Well, his name is Cornelius, and it's presented. The book is presented as an anthology of little jokes, self-conclusive jokes, and then through this apparently non-sequential jokes, it starts like a little drama. So it starts as a joke, and then finally, the idea is. Create a little drama, but you'll never know.
And it's recently released from Drawn and Quarterly in English, and it's a big book. It's close to 400 pages, right? And I think it's the best way I would describe it, and perhaps we'll talk a little bit more about this later. Is it's a book where, and I think this is true for all of the artists up here, is that there are these smaller interconnected pieces that make it more than the sum of its parts. Like 1 + 1 does sometimes equal 3.
Exactly, yeah.
All right, next up is Viviana.
Hello, my name is Vivianna Maria Stanislavska. I am from Latvia, and I am here on behalf of Kush. It's a Latvian publisher. We usually publish short stories and anthologies, so please come by our table. I mostly work on short stories. I really like shitty humor, and that is how most of my work could be described. And right now I'm working on like a second part for a comic book in a Latvian dialect of Latgalian. So it's not really translated, and I'm not sure it will be, as it's very location specific. But otherwise, that's something I do right now.
Thank you. And finally, Laura.
I'm Laura Terry. My second graphic novel just came out with Scholastic in August. It's called Adorable Empire, and it's about it's a middle grade comic about a girl who is going against the grain in pretty much every way she can. And dealing with the consequences of like not fitting in and choosing to like be goth, figuring out that she's queer, being fat and being bullied for it, and learning how to be okay with that even if everyone else isn't.
Thank you, everybody. I think one of the things I wanted to start with, and let me see, I'll start to kind of walk through some of these images, is I wanted to get a sense of the idea of this character who doesn't really fit into the world that they're living in. And I wanted to start by maybe asking a question that is more background than anything else. Are there any characters that you have really loved in comics or maybe other media where they're a weirdo or outsider and it has influenced your writing at all? Is there like some other favorite misfit that you've encountered in your reading or in your exploration of art?
Am I first?
You don't. We can. Anybody can take the question. That's perfectly fine.
Oh yeah, I'm not sure. I feel like any character should be at least a little bit awkward. Like if somebody is super successful and super like charismatic and everything, I don't know that I really want to read them because they're not relatable to me. And I feel like as a person who's doing memoir. And who's very interested in autobiography, like those of us that are doing that tend to lean into our awkwardness a little bit. Like Alison Bechdel is definitely like a big one for me, and I wouldn't necessarily describe her as super awkward, but like I think we all have like the quirks that we lean into real hard because it makes us.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something there about especially in autobio or in memoir kind of work. There's this desire to sort of fictionalize yourself to a certain degree so that you can so that the beats are better, so that the jokes hit funnier. That's definitely something I've noticed. And I'm sure, although Allison's not here to defend herself, I'm sure, and Dykes to look out for, I'm sure there are some jokes that like she punched up in order to make them funnier.
Right.
That's definitely fair. There are plenty of like, I think I would say that alt comics or independent comics has this long history of like, I'll say like cartoons like Jimmy Corrigan and things like that, where it's like clearly there's this person who kind of exists outside of the spectrum of what's acceptable in the world. Or
like I'm not like in love with Crumb, but
it's
definitely like
he definitely fits.
Protagonist.
He definitely fits the name of awkward protagonist. Yeah, Robert Crumb he's definitely that. He's also a lot of other things, but.
Well, I think one of the books that I read recently is Shuna's Journey. It was Miyazaki's first.
Oh yeah.
And the thing that I think it's easy to connect with in that book is the main character is like becomes an outcast from society because he just doesn't want to do things like he wants to get food to feed his people because they're living on subsistence. They're basically just barely surviving, and so he wants to go find this grain from the gods so that they'll finally be able to like live a comfortable life and be happy instead of always having death hanging over their heads. But when he decides he wants to go do this noble thing, his whole community ostracizes him and says like, that's not possible, you're a loser, like you can't do it. And I think there's something in like finding that kind of nobility and like being able to step outside of what's conventional and say like, I'm going to do this because it matters, not because it's what everyone else is doing.
Yeah, and that really ties in with your work specifically. I think it's not. I think for middle grade readers, of which I am the parent of one, that's a space where kids are really starting to figure out what's going on with their selves, their bodies, their identities, and so being able to, I think that leads pretty nicely to a question I was going to ask. There's clearly when you're creating characters like the ones that we're talking about in your works, and I do think that Trishelle the person and Trishelle the character are different people. The thing I always wonder, it's like, what's the line between laughing with and laughing at? Right, where like laughing at your character versus laughing with them, and do you ever want to cross that line, or do you find that I think for this type of work, it's oftentimes that's the very difficult thing, right? To kind of straddle the space between I want people to root for my character, but I also want the catharsis, or I want them to be able to have a giggle here. And then, and so I think a lot of this work is weaving around that question. So I just wanted to see what you thought about that.
Yeah. Well, and we're all flawed and human, and we all fart and occasionally pee a little in our pants. So we have to represent that in our characters. Otherwise, they're just totally not believable.
I love that. Sometimes we get a little hair dye on our hands. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that it depends a lot of where do you put the point of view. I suppose, because maybe, I don't know, a few weeks ago I saw this Instagram map where you can see, I don't know where, but you can see the stories of people pointing on a map. So if you see without context what's the kind of story people partying in Israel country, and you don't know the context, it just people have fun and stuff, and then you realize that it's not I mean, it can be not so fun if you know what's happening around.
Yeah, when you have the context. Yeah, that's
exactly. So it's about, with comics we can create context.
Absolutely.
So maybe we can, at least in my book, I try first to make jokes without a lot of context about a character, and then little by little you can create a context and let the character explain himself or just describe himself, and then when you did the same joke from the beginning again in the last part, it's not as funny as it used to be. So, or it can be.
It can be, but it's bitter. It's more, at first it's
the same
funny,
joke.
but it's the same joke.
Yeah.
So it depends.
And adding on to that, it can kind of go in the other direction as well, where we can decide to give more context and make something more funny. For me, in my book, I think, the drawings of me in anguish are really fun to draw, and they're kind of funny to me, but they might not land to everybody. And then it feels like such a big thing, do I have breast cancer? This might be the end of the world. And it becomes a smaller part of the narrative as it goes along. And it's okay, this feels like a giant thing, talking about death, but it's about all of life, and how upset I am is actually kind of funny, and we can lean into that and allow it to be, and not take everything quite so seriously if we have a little bit more context and a little bit more world around it.
Yeah. I think I think there's definitely something to be said about the progression of your story in your book, moving through what's going on here to this there's the whole I guess it's all specifically for Best Breasts in the West. There's also this progression through the horrible creature that is the American healthcare system. Also, that you could almost say that the healthcare system is its own character in your book. Wanting to kind of continue our conversation and move forward and make sure that we get more pictures up. I think we talked a little bit just about context, and I think, Marc, I think that's the way that you frame that is really. I think that there are multiple ways that you could look at that idea of context. I think, for example, Laura, your book. Context gives us the information about why the character is struggling, and gives us the understanding of actually makes us want to more root for the character and continue to read and gives you that narrative. Whereas in Cornelius, where you're using context to broaden the scope of the reader's understanding and get to a point where it's like, oh, this is actually really unfortunate or really sad, so that's not actually that funny. So I wanted to ask a little bit about the idea of working inside of a context, and Viviana too, I think, specifically inside of the work you're doing. What does it mean for you to work inside of how do you frame or how do you create work that hits those notes that you want them to hit?
So I'm very lucky that I can create lots of short stories. So the characters, they do not repeat. And that means that if we circle back to do we laugh with the characters or about the characters? Yeah. So my idea is that I love to create the characters so we can laugh about them and make fun of them, and at some point notice that maybe these huge flaws that I like to exaggerate a lot, perhaps they are also inside of us. So it is easier to maybe cope with the things that we feel or the emotions, and understand that maybe some of the emotions are quite silly when we exaggerate them or we feel them overwhelming. So so the worlds I do create there are a one-time thing, mostly in the short stories, like in the last one about this guy named James who is visited by death. He kind of wants the second chance, and then he apparently gets the second chance, and he doesn't use the second chance, and then he dies again while shitting. So we can definitely see a little part of ourselves there as well. That it gives us also the question: do we value, in this example, do we value more of our comfort or living for real, so discomfort, comfort, and so on.
Yeah, I love that comic because I think, let me see if we've got I think I've got an image of it. Let me see, is it in here? Where did it go? Oh, no, I didn't put it in here. I'm sorry. So he's like, death has changed me. I can do whatever I can do anything. I can do whatever I want. And then he's sitting down in front of the television. I can do anything I want tomorrow. And I think that lends to that sense of sometimes I think one of the things that when you're creating characters like this, one of the questions I wanted to ask for you is it important for your characters to change, or is it more important that they stay the same? I think there's a variety of answers on this panel, so I wanted to kind of get that thought from all of you.
Wow, that's a really good question. I would love to see my characters change, but usually 6 pages is not enough. So if the stories are short, then usually not letting the character change and stay the same really creates the story itself.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's here, but there is another story where a guy gets the chance to create peace between 2 kinds of little dwarfs that look like fingers. And he's like, okay, but I have to work, so let's do it in the evening. And he goes to work and he has the shittiest day of his life. And when he comes back, the dwarfs are standing there like, okay, can you help us now? And he gets so mad because the day was so shitty, so he just squishes all of them. So in that sense, I really like the fact that my character overall was from the start very emotional, and how the emotions can trigger multiple things that maybe without those emotions we might not do. But the character he didn't change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Trishelle, I'd say it probably is a little bit of the opposite for you, right? at least from the beginning, like the perspective of I guess I'll just die to like no.
I mean, that's definitely like a narrative shift
Yeah.
that happens. It's I mean, particularly with like longer work, I think it is a difference between 6 pages versus 130 pages or whatever my book is. Like, I think if I had started off feeling exactly the same as I did and living in the same world and it ended on the same note, it would be a disappointing read. I'm still the same person in a lot of ways, and so much shifts can only happen, but I think in Best Press in the West particularly, it's definitely that shift was really what the book is about, is deciding to live and deciding that that's what I wanted. And it's kind of in a book that has a lot of like little kind of vignette pieces, the main through line.
I'm trying to get to your books while we're talking about it. Here we are. Okay. I've decided to not scroll through these just piecemeal and to try and get to your book while we're talking about it, because I thought that might be helpful as opposed to just like clicking through. Marc, do you think Cornelius changes?
No, I don't think so.
I didn't think so either. I think that's what makes him such a compelling character.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about writing this dog character, and what and how you are using him as kind of sometimes the jokester, and most of the times the butt of the joke. How do you?
What can you repeat the last?
Yeah. How do you? Well, tell us a little bit about how you think about writing Cornelius, or like creating the jokes that he often is he's the butt of the joke.
Yeah. And I don't know exactly how it came, because it's just I carry all the time a little sketchbook. So I note this kind of conversations, and usually it's funny to. I mean, it's the first question, right? I mean, it's always fun. It's always funny to see someone who is not winning, because it's the winner sometimes, at least in Spain, I don't know here, but it's always the hated one. We don't like people to win. We like that. We prefer people to just stay loser. And no.
It is funny.
And yeah, so this kind of the character appears just suddenly, but then creating the book and how the characters pass through all these problems that he has, it's more like something more meditated. But yeah.
I think a very early example of this in the book is where Cornelius lends money to a friend to go bet on dog racing, which by itself is a hilarious thing. He's lending money to a dog walking around on its 4 legs, and he's walking like a person. And they go to bet on a dog race, and then the punchline of the joke is that the friend just gives him back the money that he borrowed.
And he win. The friends win.
Yeah, the friend wins a lot of money, and he's just like, "Oh, here's the money back that I borrowed."
Yeah, it's not. It's really not. It's like not. I like the structures of. I mean, I like to create the situations that has the structure of a joke, but. When you realize, you analyze it, it's not really a joke. It's just a bad situation. It's like a
yeah. It's just a shitty situation.
Yeah, but if you explain it as a joke, it becomes a joke.
Yeah,
right.
It's true.
Or not, maybe.
And Laura, I think change, or maybe not, maybe change. It is change, but like talk about how Jinx kind of like moves through the world and comes to a realization about herself. Like, 'cause I think specifically in your book, like I think that self-acceptance and that transition is a crucial piece of what makes it work so well as a narrative.
Yeah, I think the big change is letting go of the past is the biggest one, because she starts out the book where her parents are together and she has a best friend and life is kind of simple, and then her best friend develops a new friendship with a girl who bullies her, and her parents get divorced, and she realizes that she's gay, and so she's kind of holding on to this time when she was happy, even though like that happiness isn't there for her anymore. And I don't know, I always like to, I'm nosy, I always like to like pull up the lid and learn what people are thinking and what motivates them. So like I was really interested in following like the psychological changes of like what it felt like to hope for something that doesn't exist anymore, and to like learn to accept that. And meanwhile, the people around her aren't changing. Like her parents are stuck in their same patterns. So yeah.
I think that's the reason why it feels so like, if I guess the way I'll put this specifically about your book is that because no one else is changing, that's what really gives Jinx's change the drama that it needs in order to thrive as a narrative. Do you think that that's like an essential component of the story, is like no one else changes while Jinx does?
Oh, for sure. I think so. I kind of wanted to do a book where the stakes were really low. I didn't want her to run around trying to like save the world, or like, you know, have to rescue her parents from death. I want it to be like the kinds of crisis that like kids face when they're 13. And you know, and also magical woodland creatures.
Who doesn't love those?
Yeah, but yeah, I think that's what it makes like the changes, which in her like aren't that dramatic. Like it makes them seem dramatic. And I also think, honestly, like truly changing is incredibly hard. So like it doesn't look like a big deal on the outside, maybe, but I think it is like the big struggle of a lifetime to try to like make better choices, to make yourself happy, and to be like proud of who you are.
Yeah, that's a great point. I wanted to dive in a little bit about your specific creative processes in terms of the way that you're maybe thinking about the situations in the books that you're creating. Now, Trishelle, this is kind of a loaded question because you're doing autobio. So it's like, it's clearly drawn from life. Mm-hmm. But Marc, I heard you say like, oh, I just keep a little sketchbook in my pocket, and when I hear something that I think could be a good joke, I'm gonna write that down. Like, how much of the context of your work is specifically drawn from real life? And maybe Trishelle, I'll bend it a little bit by asking like, how much are you having to fabricate in order to make the joke hit, you know?
Sometimes I just live something and it's funny and it's like, okay, now I have to make a comic about that. Sometimes I'll experience something and it's like I have to take photographs so I have reference pictures for later. Like, there's a moment in my book in chapter 5. I like go to the doctor for a checkup and my mom is there with me and she's like, should I come in with you? And I'm like, no, you don't need to see my boobs, whatever. And then at the end of the chapter, like the doctor convinces her to like touch the area in my breast that like is concerning. So my mom is there and she's feeling my boob and she's like, oh, I can see why you were concerned. And like, when the doctor said to her, like, you know, do you want to feel this? And like, offered that up to me, like the reason I was like, yes, do this, was because I was like, this is too funny for me to not make into a comic. Like that was when like I knew that I was making this book, basically.
Oh yeah, you got that. You thought that you were in here. Now you're really in here. That strikes me as having published the book. That scene hits completely differently differently now that I know that you're like, oh no, I'm going to make this into a story, and you're going to have to. Everybody's going to get to experience this with me, not just my mom.
Yes.
Marc, how much you said that you're constantly drawing from life. Is it just like little pieces, fragments of conversations, or like are you sometimes pulling from whole cloth? Like
it's some kind of a digestion. I think that something happens and then reminds me of some idea or something like that. But I try not to represent the exact situation, more like speculate on some other situation that maybe it's makes a caricature of what I want to explain or something, but
exaggerating.
For effect. But so I suppose that Cornelius could be some has a little bit of autobiographical stuff, but it's so fictionated that it's not really. I mean, I've never been involved on a kidnap.
And thank goodness for that.
So, but it represents things that are in my environment. I suppose it's always like that.
Yeah, I think life does influence art, obviously. Viviana, because you're working in such short pieces, it's kind of harder to ask that question. But I think, are you drawing ideas for your short comics? Are they coming directly from situations you've had in your life, or it's just like, oh, this is a funny joke, I'm just going to roll with it?
Quite similarly, actually, to Marc's process. I do carry a notebook as well, and whenever I hear something that I'm thinking to myself, wow, that's stupid, I just write it down. And then usually, when the time comes that I need to create a comic, then I just go through all of those notes and sketches and choose what fits and what can be expanded. Like, for example, one comic that got featured in the German magazine Le Monde Diplomatique. The joke came from the study hall. I was listening to the professor talking, and he wanted to lighten up the mood, and he told some kind of very old anecdote. Nobody laughed, and I thought that it's so terrible, it's so bad, and then I drew it into a comic, and suddenly, for some reason, it became not really funny, but why? It raised the question why, and that's the thing I like in those stories, that you can always think about it a little bit more and be like, why would someone even draw this, and then maybe find the deeper meaning in that.
Laura, how about you?
This is so embarrassing. I can't believe you asked this. Yes, I did live with adorable woodland creatures when I was in middle school.
I think we all did, actually. No, that's. But it's really interesting that you've got these really big life-changing things. But I think one of the things that I always think. There are some times when I'm reading a comic, I'm like, someone actually said this in real life. And there are a couple times in your book, I'm like, oh no, someone has actually said this in Laura's periphery.
Oh no, my therapist has read my book.
Oh.
And she has pointed out a thing or two. That when the mom squeezes Jinx right after she's almost died, and Jinx is like, no, too tight. She was like, that happened. And I was like, but I think there are emotions in it that are really true, and there are certain images. There's an image of a room in a school that I made a really important scene because it just had a resonance with me. But yeah, there are things like that are true in my life that are in the book, but it tends to be more little tiny moments or big feelings.
Yeah. Well, let's see. In an endeavor to keep on time, it's about 4:40. So I think what we'll do now is we'll open up to question and answer from the audience. We're going to have microphones on either side of the room here. So if you'd like to ask a question for one of the panelists, please come on over to one of the microphones. If no one decides to stand up, that's okay. I can talk But I wanted to make sure that other folks had a chance to ask some questions of our panelists today. I'll give folks a couple seconds to stand up, and if not, I can continue to ask questions. These lights are very bright, so it's hard for me to see back there. Thankfully, it'll look good for YouTube. That's what matters, right? I think one of the questions I had, and it's easier for me to get to understand what the answer is going to be from Trishelle, because again, I published That's Breast in the West. But when you think about creating your work, is there like a specific emotional core of the work that you're trying to draw out? Is there something that you're trying to get off your chest, so to speak, or to draw out in the reader that's important for you?
Yes.
Yeah.
I wrote notes on my phone the other day because I was I'm not sure how much I'm going to have to talk about things, but I wrote something in my phone. I have to look at it. I feel I talked a little bit about leaning into the sort of awkward elements of a personality because I feel it's relatable, but that's also what I'm doing in my artwork, because I have a probably unhealthy habit of holding up my book and being this is me. not me, this is me. Because it's easier for me to relate to people that way. If I actually have to deal with human, physical people on a real world basis, and my personal awkwardness and the reality of who I am and all of that, then it's easier to be misunderstood than here's this narrative that I laid out that shows you who I think I am.
Cartoonists don't have control issues. That's not a thing.
Yeah, that's not at all. Not at all.
But yeah, I think I use my work as therapy in a way that's probably not actually helpful, and I use my work as a shield in a way that's probably not actually helpful, but it is the way that I have learned to live, and I'm gonna keep doing it. You can't stop me.
No one can stop you. You're unstoppable. Any other thoughts? It looks like we've got some folks with questions. I'm not sure who came up to first, so all right. Yes, all right. Thank you. Thank you for helping.
Hi, I have a question. When you have your protagonist as somebody who's less confident in themselves and less self-assured, how do you manage having confidence in your narrative itself if the protagonist is kind of the main vehicle for the narrative?
That's a great question.
For me, I think if things are uncomfortable enough, change will happen, and it doesn't have to happen in a way that's elegant or on the face of it brave, just taking one step after the other.
If I understood the question right, it's how can the artist have the confidence in their unconfident character? Oh, sorry.
So when the main character maybe isn't self-assured or is kind of unstable in the world that they're in, creating stability in the story itself, where things might be coming from the perspective of somebody who isn't really sure of what's going on around them or sure of themselves, but finding a way to convey to the audience who's reading the book what exactly is going on through all of this.
Mm-hmm. That sense. So for my short stories, it's usually more or less with the movement of the character, the poses I put the character in and the composition I create. Sometimes I like to leave a little bit too much on the upside of the panel to give the illusion of space, but actually the character is a little bit squished, for example. So it's mostly through the visual language for me.
I think that I don't understand too. I understand that you are asking when the main character is insecure and unstable, but you want that the reader has a stable point of view of what's happening, something like that.
Yeah.
But I don't. Why? I mean, what's the question? I mean, there is no connection between one thing and the other, right? I mean, you can do a very bad planning of a story, even if the character is very well.
For me, it's more about. It's more about the contrast between the two. So kind of finding a way to balance out keeping the reader grounded, so the reader has some idea of what's happening, whereas the person that the story is centered around may not know what's going on or may not be sure of themselves.
I think what Mark's trying to get at is like it is kind of those threads do run parallel to one another, and like. Sometimes that contrast is actually what makes it, where the character is not confident in this narrative, but you can tell from the artist's hand and like the approach that they did in the composition, and the way that they approach the story that like they're confident about telling this story, and it's that juxtaposition that kind of like makes it work maybe.
And I think too, specifically, this is just my perspective of Marc's work, is that the reader is actually not supposed to have a confident understanding of what's going on. The reader learns more and more, and then that casts everything that you've read up to this point into a completely different light. Every time a new piece of information is introduced in Cornelius, it's like, oh, the thing that I just read that was funny on its face now has even more. It's like, oh, that's actually just really depressing, So it's like, so you're actively. I think one of the things that I think is really interesting about Cornelius is you're actively working to unbalance the reader through the act of adding information over time. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I think that it's important when you do a comic yourself. Try to be very possessive about how much information you are giving to the reader. At least, be conscious of that. So I don't know if that's the right answer for you, but I don't know if you are doing cartoons for a lot of, or comics for how many time are you?
I'm completely independent. I'm just doing my own thing.
You're a journalist.
Yeah.
Okay.
We need more enjoyers.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Glad you're here and thank you for asking the question.
Yeah.
But well, I always think about my aunt or someone who is not interested at all of what I am doing, and try to convince that person in my head that this can be read. It's my point always.
I like that. It's like when I sometimes have that same thought as I'm making books. It's like, would my delightful great aunt think that this is any good, or like would she think that I'm going insane? Most of the time it's the latter, actually. We'll go over here to what's your question, please?
Sure. So my question is specifically for Marc and Viviana, and it kind of occurs to me that in bringing your art into language and cultures that they weren't necessarily written for, like here, in the English-speaking world in the United States, your work is also kind of becoming its own fish out of water. And I'm curious what you find is both gained and lost when you move the context that your comics are read and how they're understood and by who.
Excellent. So does the act of translating into English or moving it to a different part of the world, does that change the context of your stories?
Yeah, I can start.
Yeah.
So for me specifically, the short stories for Kush are usually written already in English because they publish the books in English. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't say that something is lost in the translation, but of course there are things that it's difficult to explain in a third language. So there are times when I ask people who are like native English speakers to help me with like some puns or stuff like that. But otherwise, the book that is not translated to English, and I don't think it ever will be translated, is due to its very specific storyline that is associated with like current politics in Latvia, and Latvia versus Latgale, which is like a region, and how these two regions, like overall Latvia and Latgale, how they interact between themselves and how the languages interact between themselves. So that is like a context that is readable only there. Like if I would translate it and bring it here in English, you would just see a really cute story about a cat and a dog becoming friends, and that's all. But like when you read it in that context, then you can see the very, very lots and lots of layers underneath that.
Yeah, I guess, of course, there is always, it's always important, right, the context. And yeah, in my case, I'm sure that some of the jokes, they were written as I play with words in Spanish. So the translator, I work with the translators from D&Q or this or another languages to try to find the perfect, create new jokes. But and the storyline, I think that it's almost it's related to this comic context in US. I think. I mean, you can relate it because Spain, it's a country that it's like a cultural colony from a lot of years. We are colonized from you, so there is always some kind of a conversation between this, how we saw your world or your point of view of the world, and try to play with that.
I think that's one of the joys and challenges of translation is adaptation, and especially comedy. It's very hard to translate. Yeah. So I think the folks that you worked with Drawn and Quarterly did a fantastic job trying to bring the humor, because it's part of the reason why so many funny comics don't actually do very well when they're translated, is because the adaptation is not up to the challenge of delivering. So, I think we've got time for one more question. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Over here.
Okay, so obviously everyone in this panel thinks it's important that their heroes are awkward. Do you think it's important too that your heroes are weird as well? And what do you think the relationship is between being a weird hero and being an awkward hero? Do you think there's like a relationship between those things?
I mean, I wouldn't.
Are those even different?
I guess for me, it's also like I don't have a choice whether or not my hero is awkward. Like I just.
It's just that's fair.
Yeah, for me, I don't know if I can answer super, because my English is super limited. So for me, awkward, it's like in awkward, there is some kind of weirdness, right, in awkward. So maybe it's too it's the level.
I think like having people being human and in their own human ways that we kind of think about as awkwardness versus like subcultures and like niche sort of interests and the stuff that we think about as weirdos, like those do have a lot of overlap. And I think like there's a lot of value in both of them. I think like the last few years have had a really excellent focus on, getting voices of like queer authors and people of color, and like that's really good and necessary because we need those voices and we need, those viewpoints. So I think like that's another element of it. Like there's sort of like, it's a Venn diagram of all kinds of different things, and like hopefully you can find like the crossover of weirdness and awkwardness and punkness and whatever that like fits you. And we can only do that if we have a lot of people making work about their particular things.
Well, and also like what is being like weird and awkward than like feeling like an outsider, and I think that's a pretty universal feeling. Like all of us looking at our phones, scrolling on Instagram, feeling like we're not like attractive enough or rich enough or successful enough, and feeling like we don't belong. I think that's just so like intrinsic to being human. So I almost feel like aren't they all weird? Like aren't they all awkward? Like I think at least most main characters feel that way. Most humans feel that way.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. We also have a silly saying in our friend group, like, would you rather be weird or boring? So, well, I think most people do feel a little bit weird, and that's totally okay.
Agreed.
Yeah. I think
awkward is more like disgusting.
No, weird is like no. It's like weird is like has like unusual behaviors and awkward is just kind of like not good in social settings, not confident. The thing that we say where I'm from is the only people you think who aren't weird are the people you don't know well. Everyone who you know well is a weirdo. They're just weird in their own way.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I think that takes up all the time that we have today. Big round of applause to our artists.